Hello, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to the Sunset Safari. And as you can see, we did start our afternoon with some elephants. Unfortunately, because it is so incredibly windy, they seem to be a little bit unsettled and they've set off to hide themselves in this drainage line. So I'm going to try and see if we can reposition and just get a better view of them. Now, for those of you who don't know, my name is Jamie and I have Jeandre on camera with me for this afternoon. It's a very hot and blustery day here on the in the Sabi Sands. It's around 32 degrees centigrade, so very, very warm. I actually had my first swim of the season. We've also had 3 different snake sightings today in and around camp, but I will tell you all about those a little bit later. Let's see first if we can get a nice visual of these ellies. They are on the move, and I'm just trying to see where would be a good place to go and find them. We're just on Twin Dams Road, for those of you who are more familiar with the geography of the area. And that means we are right next to the Mulwati drainage line, which is where these ellies have decided to hide themselves this afternoon. I'm looking for a sneaky little entrance in. We're still quite far from most of the junctions. So let's see if we can sneak our nose in somewhere here. Maybe we'll get a better visual of them. Now, I'm fairly certain this is the same herd that Scott, James and myself had when we were out on tracking team this morning, and they do look as though they've spent some time cooling off in the mud, and I certainly don't blame them. And if you are joining us for the first time, this is the sort of thing that happens to us all the time, because it is a live safari. Everything that you are seeing on your screen is happening right here in the Sabi Sands on Djuma and Arathusa game reserves. And we're also an interactive safari, so if you do have any questions that you'd like to ask us or any comments that you would like to make, you can do that by the hashtag Safari Live on Twitter, or you can email through to questions@wildearth.tv. Now, the nice thing about getting to know an area and spending a bit of time, especially when you get some cool sightings in drainage lines, is that you start to know all the little sneaky entrances and exits. So I'm taking the off-road track that we were following to get down to that buffalo kill that was here about maybe a month and a half ago, that the Nkuhumas killed and then the Birmingham boys stole from them. So the track has been made nice and clear for us. Let's see if we can get down and spot what's happening in here. Now, for those of you who were watching the sunrise safari this morning, you will know that Brent spent some time with Shadow and Sindile. And Scott, James and myself were out tracking early in the morning. We started at Gowrie Main and tracked all the way down south to the Arathusa, basically to the Arathusa airstrip. And we were just pipped at the post to finding them by one of the Chitwa trackers. We all started working together in tandem. I'm actually going to deviate from the path a little bit and try get into the drainage line from here. And it is nice and warm, so I'm hoping that the ellies are going to stick around a little bit. I can see them from where I am. Hello, girls. What you up to? hoping there'd be less of a step here. Let's just stop for a moment. You can have a look at where they are. They are sleeping in the Tambuti thicket, or at least resting in the Tambuti thicket. And there's a couple more on the other side of the drainage line. But they did seem to be moving in our direction, so hopefully they will decide to come through. As I said, it is very, very warm and blustery today. It is 32 degrees, which is 94 degrees Fahrenheit, which I think is one of the warmest afternoons that I've certainly been driving on. Hello, ellies. You can see how incredibly thick it is. Now, what I am going to do, because we definitely can't get a nice view of this herd, is I'm going to go back down into the drainage line where I know that I can get down. There's a nice big step here that I don't think even Jigger will be capable of getting down. So we're going to loop back around and go down into the drainage line and then drive up to them. It also means that my approach is much, much quieter, so I don't need to stress them out. And many of our regular viewers will know that these blustery kinds of days where the wind is howling often tend to set the animals a little bit on edge, just because their sense of smell and their sense of hearing, which are their two dominant senses, they can't really rely on them as strongly. And to be honest, I'm really secretly quite excited to see if this is Mr. Wrinkly Bottom's herd, the little elephant that I've heard so much about but have yet to have properly had an encounter with. Brent was out this morning, and the one thing about coming into the car after Brent has been driving it is that there is quite the size difference between the two of us, believe it or not, in terms of height, and I can't get the chair to move back forward. So we're doing a little bit of twisting and turning here to reach the clutch. Now, just to stop here for a moment, I think this could well be where the ellies were having a little bit of a mud wallow earlier. There's still plenty of groundwater around, and I can see fresh splash marks, not too much. I don't think the adults got too involved, but the babies certainly may have. There you can see at the back of that puddle where the fresh wet mud has splashed up. And there's lots and lots of ellie tracks around the area. This is close to where I saw them this morning. I think they came through here, and the babies just had a quick mud bath to cool off. Something I might think about joining them in. I tried to have a quick swim earlier, and it certainly worked for about 5 minutes or so before I was hot again. Now let's loop our way down in here. We can get a nice view of those ellies. spotted, or Genre at least, has just spotted one of our little furry friends. I'm going to stop for a moment and see. Just let me see if I can spot where the rest of them have gone. The squirrel having quite the snack. Trying to work out what he's feeding on there. Let me just grab my binoculars. Very, very cute. Oh, did you drop it? I wonder what you were eating. Still nibbling on something, and I think probably it was a seed cover, and he's now managed to get to the oil-rich part of the seed. I'm just looking at where we are. The tambuertes aren't really fruiting at the moment, but he could well have picked up something from inside of all of this elephant dung that's around us. Unbelievably agile little creatures. We've got quite a few of them living around camp. They get very comfortable very quickly with human presence, far more so than most of the other little mongooses and other creatures around us. You can see how incredibly well adapted they are. They've got 3 toes in the front of their foot and then 2 slightly more off to the side, and those 3 toes just provide that extra little bit of grip and stability in the front, and then those side toes on either side, just that extra bit for the balance. Squirrels are highly entertaining, but also very, very useful little creatures. They've got incredibly sensitive eyesight, and as many of the regular viewers know, they're usually the first ones to spot any kind of threat and give us some kind of warning, especially very useful if you're trying to look for something like a leopard, because they really, really don't appreciate their presence in the area. You'll start to hear them shouting and doing their, what to me always sounds like a sort of a witch's cackle. There's also a couple of dwarf mongoose that have been scurrying around. Most of them have disappeared off now. They've ducked away under cover. We get a couple, there's a lot of different dwarf mongoose colonies. Let's see if we can make our way to these ellies. It's a bit of an adventure from my side, and of course from Genre's side, because I'm not too sure if I can get through here. But let's give it a go. We're a little bit further than I realized from the only path into this drainage line. Now we've seen plenty of groundwater around, and we're starting to see the new shoots, and we're making our way towards these elephants. And Pamela was wondering if they would be more active now that it has rained and it's not as dry. And Pamela, there might be an argument for the fact that they don't have to move as far to get nutritional food. But I don't think that that's the case just yet. There hasn't been that big of a change in terms of the leaves of the trees and so on. They're starting to get green shoots, but they're still having to work to find the nutritious foods. There's still not that much fresh grass. Whee! Watch out there. Let's see if we can do this. Certainly never a boring day. Now, I definitely wouldn't say there's been more activity from the ellies or less activity. They might be a little bit less active during the heat of the day just because it is hotter. There we go, getting a bit closer now. And I'm hoping that the herd has decided to stay where I left them and hasn't now moved up onto the bank or something. Duck under here, Jeandre. Okay, we'll do this nice and slowly. As you can see, we have a slight ellie-induced roadblock, but luckily the elephants are still where we left them. And on my way back out, I'm actually going to stop and talk about that hole there. Now, apparently yesterday with Scott, you had a long chat about why elephants have wrinkly skin. And Deborah, who is all the way in Ontario, Canada, has suggested that maybe ellies have wrinkly skin because it helps to keep the mud on their skin for longer and protect them from the sun. I think that's a very, very valid point. Could well be. I'm just trying to work it out. My guess would be because wrinkly skin increases their surface area. In fact, I'm going in a similar direction. Their wrinkly skin increases their surface area just a little bit and just helps with that heat exchange. All right, my girl. Hello. I'm going to stop here. Don't worry. Hello, big girl. Hello, big girl. So this is actually quite a big herd. We've got this nice visual of the three of them here, and they're just clustered in the shade. And what's noticeable about this particular female is she's got an incredible difference, or very, very obvious difference, between her right and her left tusk in terms of length. And that will be not purely from rubbing the one shorter than the other. That will be because one of them was snapped off and broken at some point. And there we go. We know for sure. You can see the tip of that right tusk is much, much sharper than the left. And that was almost definitely a break in the tusk. And it could have been that she had a crack, because remember that tusks are teeth, just like our teeth, and they can have faults and infections and abscesses. I think she was just having a little bit of a stretch there. And this is a very, very sleepy elephant herd. They've all gone very still. These three have tried to cluster into the rather insubstantial, there's the word I'm looking for, insubstantial shade of that leadwood. The rest of them are still clustered away in the tambuti thicket off to my left. It's going to be very, very difficult to get a visual for now. I will, on my way out, we'll stop and have a look at them. But for now, at least, we've got a clear visual of these three. There's at least, I think that's a bull at the back. He's quite far in the deep bush. And these elephants have decided to have a bit of a snooze. So Pamela, who was wondering if they are more active during the rainy season or the dry season, it really is just dependent on their access to food. And usually on hot days like this, it's nice to just have a bit of a rest. And on our way through, Scott, James and myself this morning, when we were out on tracking team, we actually saw one of the babies flat, lying down, fast asleep. It was very, very cute. And it's amazing how silent this herd has gone. There must be at least 15 elephants here, quite possibly even more. Because they've gone so quiet, they're not feeding in any way. You would never have known they were here. Even baby's quite sleepy. You can see eyelids drooping. And there is, I wonder if I can position that we can get a view of it. I think it's going to be very, very tricky. Off to my left, there is one adult lying down. So I'm going to try just shift. I don't want to, let's wait and see. I don't want to actually disturb this little group to my right. And I think that if I tried to get much further forward, I would. They are trying to have an afternoon nap. Let's stay here for the moment. But it's nice to see elephants do lie down, and it's not just the babies, the adults will as well. They're more than capable of lying down. They are a bit limited as to the amount of time that they can spend on their sides. Obviously because of that great weight and the crushing effect that it has on their organs. So they have to shift around and move. Now we've seen these three, they were the originally, let's try and start that sentence again. These three ellies were the ones that we started with right at the beginning of the sunset safari. And we had a nice shot of all three of them about 5 minutes before we went live, and then they all dashed down into the drainage line. But they have kept slightly separate from the rest of the herd. And Debbie was wondering if that's because both of these babies are hers, and what sort of ages they might be. Now the little one is still suckling, as we saw just now. I gave a nice demonstration, but it's quite big, and I would put it at probably around 2 years old. The milk tusks might be there, but they might be hidden behind the flaps of the skin around the trunk. Babies do have little baby teeth that barely show through, and they don't necessarily always show through. The older one I would probably put at about 5 or 6. You just think about that for a moment. Yes, maybe between 5 and 6 years old, probably around 5.5, I would say, which means that they could well both be hers. I'm just looking at the sizes, maybe even younger. Now typically with females, they will go between 3 to 4 years between calves, usually around 4 years, because their gestation period is in the region of 2 years, and they can lactate up to 2.5 years. So there's plenty of time in between. I'm just trying to do the maths in my head. It would suggest to me that it is a possibility just that both of these are hers. It could also be that it's a niece or a nephew of hers. And let's see if we can get an idea as to the gender of both of them. The little calf to me is a little female. The calf at the back I can't quite see. But yes, Deborah, it's entirely possible that they're both hers, and the way that they're both sticking to her like glue at the moment. But remember that elephant herds have a very, very strong bond between herd members. So it's not impossible that it's a niece or a nephew who's come to spend some time with her aunt. And like all mammals, elephants do have hair. Obviously the most prominent of which being the hair on the ends of their tail, but there you can see the little fluffy bits on top of this calf's head. And a very, very peaceful elephant scene. You can see how exhausted that little calf is. It is basically asleep on its feet. Eyes closed, or sort of awake. Not really though. Just the little ears going to keep it cool. And there's some signs of life. I'm going to try and shift around so that we can see the other ellies. They are tucked away right in this tambuti thicket, but I am going to try and shift forward just a little bit and very, very slowly and see if maybe we can get a visual of the one that is lying down, especially now since a lot of them are awake and feeding. Love to be able to show you what an adult elephant looks like while it's lying down. All right, big girl. Okay, that's as close as I'm going to get to your family. Sorry, my girl. It's all right. Hello. Having a little bit of a dust bath. She seems to be the most awake one of the group. There's actually two lying down. There's one to her left, or to the left of her. Oh, she's coming round. Maybe she might give us a clearer view. No, she's blocked. She's blocked our sleeping ellies completely. But down to the left of her, we can just see above the grass. That little lump down there is a sleeping baby. Here you can see little feet. And typically the babies will be able to lie flat, although the adults can as well. Oh, there we go. Oh no, back to sleep. Definitely not time to wake up yet. Oh, up we get. I think there's actually two babies lying down there. Oh, just had to reposition. Rolled over for the afternoon nap. Very, very cute. And this is very definitely a very peaceful ellie herd that we've got at the moment. And how privileged are we that we get to sit with them and watch babies that feel comfortable enough in our presence to actually stay lying down and continue their afternoon nap. Now, a great deal of this vegetation that they're currently standing in is tamboti tree, which I don't see any of them feeding on at the moment. It is incredibly toxic to human beings. 1 teaspoonful of the latex that comes from tamboti trees could kill a person quite easily, and any less than that would definitely make you feel very, very ill. But for ellies, they will be able to eat it, especially if they have a bit of an upset stomach. Now, I know that we had a really long conversation the other afternoon as to whether or not elephants vomit. And as far as I've been able to find out, they don't. But they will eat tamboti trees to help settle an unhappy stomach. Oh. And it does seem to me like the ellies are starting to wake up now, thinking about having a bit of a snack after their nap. The one baby is up and about. And the elephants are definitely up and about. I'm not sure if you could hear it, but they gave that typical low communication rumble. And that was, I think, the message to, or the signal that it's time to get up and go. Still rumbling to each other. Quite possibly contact calls with the rest of the herd to let them know that it might be time to move off or to get up. Still rumbling away to each other. Contact calls between herd members. Now, you will have heard as I drove in that I was talking to the elephants, and obviously they don't understand what I'm saying, but there is definitely an understanding of tone. And Sharon from Pittsburgh was wondering if elephants respond differently to men versus women, and it depends on, it's more to do with the pitch of your voice than necessarily male and female, although I do believe that they are smart enough to know the difference between men and women. And the most pronounced effect that you'll see from animals distinguishing between male and female is from the primates. They are very, very aware of the difference between men and women and are usually much more intimidated by men than they are by women, even if there's not much size difference between the individuals. But with elephants, it's probably a combination of smell. They are aware, but I've never experienced different responses to me versus a man. Oh, over the top. And how cool is that we got all of these communication rumbles and the herd is disappearing off, and there's probably the smallest one of the group. Hello, little one. Staying very close to the protection of mom and having a quick post-nap drink. And it is, as I mentioned, such a privilege to get to spend time with an elephant herd, having a nap in a tambuti cluster, in a drainage line. How special is that? We got to spend some of their precious afternoon with them. And Grace has been in Kruger recently, mentioned that they also saw baby elephants lying down and resting, and was wondering whether the adults ever do the same. And they definitely do. I've seen all sizes, from adult females to adult males, lying down. Something that they are more than happy to do. Very often they'll try and find a bit of a slope, so a termite mound, or lean against a tree, just to make getting up a little bit easier. Ooh, step over. Let me show us how agile elephants are. So yes, the adults will lie down and sleep, and even if there isn't a termite mound or a big tree that they can lean against, they can lie flat and they can get back up again very, very quickly. I would say that the young ones probably do it more often than the adults. Bye-bye, little one. And our original three are also making their way off further into the drainage line. Now, just looking at the road ahead, I would say it might be time for us to leave these elephants. It's a little bit thick in there. There go our starting three. I don't think we're going to manage to go crashing after them. Still a really, really special moment. Now, our ellies are disappearing up into this drainage line. Most of them have actually scattered off to the right and the left. And I think that rather than stressing them out after the privilege that we've had of spending some time with them, I'm going to attempt to turn us around and make our way back out. Now, I do know that this morning you were looking for different species of birds with Brent, and I've had a look and a listen to what birds you saw this morning. So if I see anything different and exciting on our way out, we're definitely going to stop and have a chat about them. And let's see, maybe we can get to the 50 bird total for the day. I know that Brent set that down as a goalpost. I also want to start heading in the direction of Arethusa. I haven't forgotten about Shadow and young Mediba, her cub. Now, they had a kill this morning. We're not too sure what it was, but they had very, very full bellies, which is why I wanted to stop by the elephant herd first so that we could spend some time with them. I don't think Shadow and Mediba are going to have gone too far. From what I saw this morning, they were very, very full cats. So that is what we are going to be doing. For now, we're going to be heading across in the direction of Arethusa and see what those two have been up to. really special experience, and I mentioned that there were probably over 15 elephants around us in that sighting. Just a couple of them were close to us, but there were lots and lots of little babies. Now the first two that we saw were probably in the region, I think I said, of around 2 and then 5.5, 6 years old. Just want to stop and have a look down here. It's closed in, whatever it was. This was the hole that I mentioned I would investigate, but it definitely looks closed in. The reason that it attracted my attention earlier was just that I saw lots and lots of flies around the entrance. And typically when you've got a burrow inhabited like that, it will have lots of flies flying around. It's attracted to the parasites and the smell of the animal. But that has collapsed completely, so I don't think we're going to see anything there, which means I can continue with Lindsay and Pamela's question about what ages we saw. Okay, there's Gendre. Let's get Gendre through the Tambuti obstacle course. Good. Cool. Here we go. Now the two little ones were 2, 5.5 to 6. The mommy elephant was probably in the region of, I wouldn't say she was a particularly old elephant. I'd put her at around 25 maybe even a little bit younger. It's very hard to tell. You can't necessarily go just on tusk size alone, because just like with people, there's genetic variation in terms of what their tusk or how their tusks grow and develop. The other little baby, the youngest one that we saw, was probably about just under 2 years old. The very sweet one who came right at the end. And the two lying down at a guess, although it was difficult to tell from the position that we were at, I would guess at around 3. Just to give you a rough idea as to ages. Just remembered I have to go over the thorny tree to avoid the elephant hole. That wouldn't have been fun. That we've been chatting about ellies. I'm really hoping that this bird sticks around. They tend not to, so let's see if maybe we can get a shot of it. It's bright yellow just in the tree over there. There we go. Stick around. And I know that we were chatting a lot about ellies, but just to continue with our birds, to get a quick view of them, and that's generally all that you get to see of them. They duck and they dive. Now we can continue with our mission. Perfectly done, thanks Gendre. Let's try and get ourselves out of this drainage line. Going back to the ellie questions that we've had, Jilly has heard that it's the case that elephants usually nap for a short time, and is this the case? She would like to know. And generally, yes, it won't be for hours at a time. It will be for maybe 20 minutes or so at the most before they wake up and continue on their way. In that particular case, we got to see the babies will often sleep a little bit longer than the adults. So I think we were with them for maybe about 45 minutes, maybe about 40 minutes, and some of those babies were asleep the entire time. stopped for a nyala. She's going to disappear off. And it's one of the animals that we usually expect to see whilst driving these drainage lines. Still haven't seen that many bushbuck while I've been here. And for those of you joining us for the first time, bushbuck are the smallest member of the spiral-horned antelope family, so they're related to nyala. And it's come as quite a surprise to me since I've started working here as to how few bushbuck I've actually seen. Nyala are disappearing off. We've still got quite the length of drainage line to go. We're going to continue on our mission, which definitely isn't a hardship. Well, not for me anyway. This is probably one of my favorite ways or favorite places to spend time, especially when it's hot like this as it is today. Here we go, getting to our exit point, hopefully. Up we go. Here we go, safely out and about. Started off that sighting with that young female elephant with the two calves, and I mentioned because she had such a distinctive difference between the length of her right tusk and her left tusk, I mentioned that it had probably cracked off and broken at some point, and that their milk teeth are their tusks are essentially teeth. And Carolyn was wondering, probably in response to whether or not that would have been painful, whether they have nerves running through the tusks if it's hollow. And the structure is quite similar to human teeth. There is a nerve cell, or there is a nerve pathway that runs inside the base of the tusk, but not all the way through. So the enamel is very, very solid, or the ivory in the case of elephant tusks, and it runs solid all the way through. That nerve will not run all the way through, but if there is some kind of a crack or infection, it will cause them a great deal of pain, just like a human being with toothache. But that crack has to run into the base to where the nerve is. So probably, it's a guess, but I would say that that nerve probably from the base of the tusk, which is obviously in the gum, in the skin, so at the back, that nerve cell probably runs about that long into the tusk. And then the rest of it is just solid ivory. But there are lots and lots of tales of elephants with cracked tusks who have turned out to be very, or at least grumpy elephants or aggressive elephants. Nobody can quite understand why. And the answer has been found that they've got cracks in their tusks that have developed abscesses right at the base of the tusk. And you can just imagine how incredibly irritating and painful that can be. And of course that immediately begs the question as to whether or not they would know to seek any kind of natural remedy for it. Now, many of the regular viewers will know that there's lots of different painkillers out here. There's a lot of barks of trees, just in the same way that aspirin's derived from willow bark, the chemicals within willow bark. There must be some versions of natural painkillers to help them out. I wonder if they would be smart enough to know which ones to use, or even just an instinctive knowledge that if they eat this, they might feel a little bit better. elephant dentition is quite fascinating and quite unique. Just to continue with our discussion about the tusks and any kind of damage that they might suffer. Now, when we saw the babies, I said to you all that they do get milk teeth just like humans do. But then once those milk teeth fall out and they start to grow those permanent tusks, those tusks are there with them for life. Now, Deborah was wondering about the fact that WildEarth in the past has told viewers that elephants have 6 sets of teeth. And they do indeed. It's absolutely correct. It's quite... Sorry, Skipper. We are testing out new radio systems, so sometimes the names don't come through too clearly. But the 6 sets of teeth are actually the molar teeth. So the elephants go through, and it actually moves almost along a conveyor belt. They've got very, very long, flat molar teeth, very long, that take up most of their mouths. They've got 2 on the top, 1 on each side, and then 2 on the bottom, 1 on each side. And those will be replaced 6 times as they get worn down throughout their lives. But the tusks aren't subjected to the same grinding and constant chewing processes that the molars are. So the permanent set of tusks that they get when they are young, probably around 5 years old, you start to see the permanent ones. Those will grow for the rest of their lives. And if they are broken off in any way, they cannot be replaced. So you might see in the next 10 or so years that female's right tusk will have continued to grow, and probably the size difference will equal out again, because they are rubbed, the tusks are rubbed down to an extent, but not in the same way the molars are. And once adult elephants reach the end in their last set of teeth, the last set of molars, then they actually start to struggle to really chew and properly digest their food. And that in the end is one of the reasons behind the death of elephants when they do die of old age. It's not that they starve to death, it's just that they really struggle to properly chew, and therefore to get the full nutritional goodness out of the food that they're eating. So they slowly lose condition and start to die at around 60 or so years of age. So really nice long lives that they live. After our rainfall, I know that a lot of the drivers have stopped to have a look at some of the new beautiful green growth that we've started to get. And having been with those elephants, it's always interesting to consider the effect that it's going to have on their lives over the next few weeks. Now, Mumsy, welcome to the Sunset Safari. You were wondering if they will eat more during the dry season versus the rainy season, or during winter versus summer. And typically there is more nutritional value in the food that they are eating during the rainy season. You'll also see an enormous difference in the types of food that they're eating. So during the summer they can focus a lot more on grasses as well as trees. Obviously they are mixed feeders. Whereas during the winter you'll see them focus quite hard on, say, the roots of trees, where the trees have withdrawn their nutrients and are keeping them stored for the dry season. So I would say that they probably have to eat just a little bit more. I wouldn't say an enormous amount more, but just a little bit more during the summer rainfall period. I'm just going to get the impala on my right. Let's see if we can do this. got a really beautiful impala ram highlighted in the sun, and I just want to take this opportunity just to hop on the Game Drive channel, which I haven't done yet this afternoon, and ask for any updates they might have. Afternoon stations, Jamie with WildEarth. Are there any updates? And as he disappears off, there's a whole group of bachelor impala nibbling away around the drainage line. But there's also another animal that I'm going to point out to you, which is up and to the left from them, sitting in the tree. Not the clearest view in the world, but very common to see these two species together. Even more so with baboons. But in the top of that tree there is a little vervet monkey. And very often impala and monkey will, or lots of different animals, but they will all forage together and feed together as a way of just obviously increasing the number of eyes there are on the lookout. And monkeys come with that added advantage that they're nice and high up in trees. But over the next few weeks, as some of the trees start to bear fruit, we'll also see the impala hanging around beneath the monkeys and waiting for them to drop the pieces of fruit that they are plucking from the trees. It's just a great way for those impala to supplement their diet. I only see one at the moment, tucked away in what looks like an albizia tree. And if this monkey was to see something now, definitely let the impala know with that incredibly sharp bark that they have. We've had a really interesting question about the fact that over the next few months we're going to be seeing a lot of new births and new babies coming through, including those of the impala, who will be born somewhere around the end of November or the beginning of December. And in the next few months we're going to start seeing some really pregnant looking females. Now the question is, the babies come out ready to walk, and surely then their hooves are quite hard and sharp already. And we have spoken, I'm sure some of the other presenters have in the past, I know I have, about the fact that antelope hooves are and can be used as incredible weapons. Even a little antelope like a daker can do some serious damage with their sharp hooves. So the question is, while they are a fetus, how is it that they don't pierce or do any damage to the females from sort of internally? And the reason behind that is because, first of all, when they are in utero, they are tucked up with their legs folded up nice and tight, which is why when you see them when they are born, you'll see them spending quite a lot of time almost unfolding their limbs, if I could put it that way. And they're also protected by a very thick amniotic sac, so it helps to keep them, and they don't kick too hard, although you do. Even with the female, and especially with the female impalas or the ewes, you do start to see these rather sort of sharp points and sharp elbows showing through on their abdomen from time to time, and you can see little movements if you sit and watch them closely enough. So it is an amazing time, and that is a really, really good point. And I think most of it has to do with the positioning of the legs and the fact that because they come out so highly developed, by the time the hooves are nice and hard and ready for the baby to be born, there's not much room for them to move. They're born quite large and very well prepared for the outside world. So their legs are actually pushed up into their body and tucked away. Now, our monkey friend is still around, and so are our impala, but they are tucked away right in the thick bush of the drainage line. And since it is starting to get a little bit cooler, there's a bit more of a nip to the wind, I do want to start making my way towards Arethusa. We're still quite far away, and I'd like an opportunity to spend some time with Shadow and Madiba and see what they've been up to. I am not going to say they'll still be in the same place, because I've learned not to try and predict that kind of thing. But I would say that they haven't gone very far from where they were left this morning. Now, I've mentioned that we are on our way to Arethusa, and the reason behind that is this morning Scott, James and myself tracked Shadow and her cub Madiba all the way down, or all the way from Gowrie, Maine, all the way down south towards the Arethusa airstrip, where we eventually found her. She definitely had a kill. We could see where her tracks had gone all the way up to fetch Madiba, and then all the way back down, and it was a good couple of kilometers that she had to walk to go and fetch him. And they both looked very happy and panting and fed. Now, we were on tracking team, so we pulled out of that sighting almost immediately as soon as Brent arrived to show all of the viewers of WildEarth. And from what he has described to me in that sighting, Shadow was showing a little bit of impatience towards Sindile, Madiba, whoever he is. I'm still getting used to the name change. And apparently he was being quite playful. Now, when I saw the tracks, we definitely noticed there were times when he was rushing off the road and clearly hiding behind bushes and then jumping out at his mother. So he's obviously very playful at the moment, and I think that she was kind of tired and kind of not that interested in what he had to offer. So Gail, it was indeed Shadow and Madiba, and from what I've been told and from what I understand, she wasn't snarling at the car. She was actually showing a little bit of impatience towards Madiba. And we've mentioned it several times, whilst Shadow is starting to become, I think I might have to discard my hat because it's trying to blow straight into Gendre at the back there. And we've mentioned a couple of times that Madiba is starting to show signs of independence, and his mother has actually left him alone far more often than is usual, or for far longer periods anyway. And he will be under threat from a number of different animals, and one of them, believe it or not, could well be a troop of baboons. Now, Madiba's been showing a lot of interest in playing and stalking. I've seen him play stalk, not seriously stalk, but play stalk buffalo. I have seen him try to play stalk waterbuck, so he's testing his limits and really trying to see what happens. And what would be really interesting is to see what happens with him if he did try to go for a big troop of baboons. Now, I know that Trent was wondering where baboons fit in the predator hierarchy, because he's heard that a big male baboon could kill a leopard, and that is very, very true. A big male baboon, will weigh far more than young Madiba, probably in the region of about 50 to 60 kilograms, and Madiba's probably sitting on maybe 45, 50 at the moment, and they have canines that are bigger than those of a lion. If you look at their skull, or at least those of a female of a lioness, they are absolutely enormous, and they are incredibly powerful animals. But they are not predators per se. So they don't really fall into a predator hierarchy, although they could well chase away a leopard. It would take a very, very big male leopard to really challenge a baboon troop. And some leopards do specialize in hunting them. But if a baboon troop is protected by one or more big males, which it usually is, because they are in a system, a social organization system known as oligarchy, which means they've got a couple of big males looking after the group, the chances of a leopard being chased away is very, very high. But the same thing does not apply between lions and baboons. Lions are definitely far more powerful, but they are not nearly agile enough to go and hunt baboons. So it's difficult to say. I would not say that baboons fall into a predator hierarchy. They are omnivores, and they will spend a lot of time eating fruit and vegetable matter. But especially continuing our conversation with the impala fetus, they have been known on occasion, especially during the birthing season of impala, has been known for big males to go after and catch the newborn lambs. Very powerful animals. They are capable predators, but I wouldn't define them necessarily as predators. Elephants are making their way towards the Juma Dam to go and have a drink. Now, I would love to go and spend some more time with them, but I'm very, very curious to see if this bad mood of shadows that she was demonstrating this morning is just an aberration because she had to walk so far to go and fetch him, and then her tummy was full, and then she got found by people. Maybe she was just feeling a little bit irritable with him, or whether or not she's still showing signs of pushing him away slightly. And that is a really, really important part of the story that we've watched unfolding, especially because she was seen to be mating with Tingana and the Anderson male far earlier than would be considered normal for a female leopard. Usually they start to mate around a year and a half, when their male cub is a year and a half to 2 years old. And young Madiba is only just over a year, so we're still very curious to see if she is going to start pushing him away sooner than expected. We have a really big happy birthday to say to Pretty Nightmare, who is one of our regular viewers. really big happy birthday from both myself, Jean-Dre, and of course all of the WildEarth team. And you were saying it would be really nice if maybe we could have a lion or a leopard, although you enjoy all the other different types of wildlife as well. Now, I'm hoping that we're going to head across to Arathusa now, and we'll keep our fingers crossed that Madiba and Shadow will be there to show you on your very special day. Now, Pretty Nightmare was also wondering or asking if it's true that, or at least aren't most elephants on the endangered list, and if so, why do we show them on WildEarth? Now that might take a little bit of explaining, but before I do that, give me one moment because somebody's trying to get me on the Game Drive channel. Craig standing by. Good afternoon, I'm well, and yourself? Craig, I've just left Shlambi and Lov on Twin Dams. It looks like they're making their way towards the dam now. And then I'm heading back to Arathusa Airstrip for Shadow and Bantwan. Negative, not yet. Just coming up to Gowrie Main now. Copy. Okay, sorry about that. We're just making sure that we coordinate with all of the other guides who are out and about this afternoon. We don't necessarily want to check up on the same areas or drive the same areas. We want to spread out and increase our chances of finding animals. But back to the elephants and the fact that we show them on WildEarth. Throughout the world, African elephants are very much endangered, and there is an enormous poaching problem of elephants towards the north of north and central South Africa. But within South Africa, at the moment, and hopefully this will stay to the situation, we don't have as serious a problem with elephant poaching. There have not been that many recorded cases over the recent years. I know that there was, of course, the very, very sad case of Isilo's tusks disappearing. And I believe that there have been maybe 2 cases in the Kruger Park in the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years. Now, the poaching problem, the reason that we do not show rhinos, and this explanation is for any new viewers who might be joining us and aren't too sure about it. As a WildEarth policy, we do not show rhinos, just to avoid, in light of the incredible rhino poaching crisis that we do have, we avoid showing them so that we ensure that we don't try and lead any of the poachers or encourage any of the poachers to come to this area. Sorry, I'm just stopping for what was a great deal of dwarf mongoose. And I'm just going to, before I start to talk about these sweet little animals, I'm going to finish up with my thought process for Pretty Nightmare. Now, we have to be aware that there's a very careful balance that we try and strike between serious awareness raising and being able to build a connection or forge a connection between the viewers and the animals that they're seeing. And at the moment, the elephant poaching situation within the Sabi Sands is very much under control. So we feel personally comfortable, and of course we would never in any way do anything to threaten the lives of the animals that we get to view. And just a quick stop, we're on our way to one of the larger big cat predators, but we're currently sitting with the smallest carnivore in the Sabi Sands. a family of dwarf mongoose, and they are running around absolutely everywhere. I've seen at least 9, so it's quite a nice big group. Shuffling around and snuffling around. And of course, one of the things over the next few months, as this nice green grass, which is starting to show through, gets longer and longer, we're not going to be able to have necessarily as many dwarf mongoose sightings as we have had in winter, just because they might be a little bit more tucked away. They are playing a little bit shy at the moment. Just having a look to see where most of them have gone. We are right on our southern boundary, so I can't shift around to get a better view of that side of the termite mound. That seems to be where they are. But definitely one of my favorite animals to watch. Oh, and a little bit of allo grooming going on there. And that's very important for these little social mammals as a way of establishing hierarchies. And I know that I've mentioned that some of the more regular viewers will know that often in terms of establishing dominance, instead of fighting like a lot of other social animals will do, they'll actually groom each other. And the victor is the one who is able to continue grooming for the longest until both fighting individuals collapse, covered in saliva and absolutely exhausted. And that is their way. Oh, and we've got a little steenbok at the back as well. Oh, nope, sorry, Dacre. That was nearly an unforgivable slip. Just saw the black down, or the dark colour down the face. Now, dwarf mongoose are definitely some of my favorite little animals to spend time with, just because they can be so incredibly curious. And very often they will come and spend some time. If you spend enough time with them, they'll come and investigate you and come and have a sniff of your tires. And one of my favorite things to do, or that I used to do, was I'd go and sit where I knew that there was a colony like this one, and sit and watch their dynamics for as long as possible. And they, of course, they get more and more used to your presence. And I would try and figure out just in my own head which ones were the alphas. And it's quite tricky, because unless you see them with little babies, because only the alpha pair breeds, it can be very, very difficult to tell. And there's not generally that much conflict between them. But it was always fun to just sit and watch and get to know how they work. And even to get to see when the rest of the adults go off and forage, who has to stay behind on babysitting duty, which they will do in the same way that the meerkats off to the west and the more arid areas will do. And we are right on the cut line, which means we are part of the main thoroughfare. And most of our little dwarf mongoose have disappeared off into their burrows. So I'm going to continue on towards where Shadow and Madiba were last seen. See if we can get to see them. Just looking to see if I can find a nice patch to go off the road, which I can. Just got to pull over for an oncoming car. Go. Now I'm not sure whether some of the more astute viewers, the more observant viewers, I'm not sure how clear it is on screen, but whether or not you've noticed how incredibly hazy it is, and it might get even clearer as the sun starts to go down. And that's because there are fires burning somewhere, I'm not too sure where, and probably controlled burns that have been deliberately started as part of a management system. Sorry guys, just need to chat again on the Game Drive channel. Yeah, standing by. They were coming out onto Twin Dams Road, just close to Wahlberg's Junction, and it looked as though they were heading towards the dam. Yeah, that's affirmative, sorry, going north. Copy that, sorry about that. Okay, now that junction that we just turned down was where we started tracking this morning, where we first found Shadow and Madiba's tracks. Apparently a lot of the eddies have moved now down into that drainage line past the lodge, so I'm just going to update Craig on that as well. And it's great to think that the viewers who are updating us as to what's happening on the Djuma Dam camera are actually not only helping us but also the other guides in this area. Craig for JB. Craig, apparently the camera picked them up moving up the drainage line towards that waterhole, that pumped waterhole outside Gallagher. Now, I mentioned earlier that we'd had 3 different snake encounters today, and I am still planning on telling you a little bit more about that. But it does create a nice segue into Vivian's question as to what elephants would do if they were to, say, encounter something like a really large rock python. And there is a good chance that they would get a fright and move away from it. Now, I know that seems quite strange. Most of the snakes would not be able to in any way pierce the skin of, say, of the foot of an elephant. Maybe if they got unlucky, it could have been, they could maybe pierce the skin of the trunk or something like that. But for the most part, snakes aren't really a threat to elephants in any way. But in the same way that they can actually be quite startled by movement of small rodents such as mice or gerbils, they can also be startled by the movement of snakes. Now, I just want to hop onto the Game Drive radio and find out what the lineup is for young Madiba and his mother Shadow. Just having a little bit of a conversation here. Obviously, I don't want to go rushing into the sighting, so I'm just waiting for them. Afternoon stations, Jamie, WildEarth. Is there anyone with Shadow and Madiba where they were left this morning? Sorry, just to repeat the message. Okay, so we're very, very close to where we tracked them to this morning. And I have got permission to come in and see what they're up to. And of course, I'm always really excited to get to see young Madiba, who I think is definitely one of my favorite leopards, if not the favorite. I can see the other vehicles there in the sighting. I just want to double check. They do know that I'm coming. I'm just going to stop here and just make sure that it is okay to approach. Stations with Shadow and Bantuan, may I approach? Or there are 3 vehicles there? Okay, copy, thanks. Now, there are 3 vehicles in the sighting. And it seems as though we're going to need to just wait our turn before we go in. So I'm actually going to pull back out onto the road and do a bit of a loop and wait till we have an opportunity to join these leopards. And obviously it's very, very important that not only everybody has their turn, but also that we don't have too many vehicles putting them under pressure in the sighting. So we're just going to pull out for now. It seems as though there was somebody else on the list who's just made their way into the sighting. So we're going to leave them for now and come back in a moment. we make our way out, it has been a very, very warm day here in South Africa on in the Sabi Sands. And there was a question from David as to what we do in terms of protecting our skin and whether or not we wear sunblock and what sort of factor we need to use. And it is a particular subject that I know my mother in particular worries about in terms of making sure, and she's always been very, very conscientious, both of my parents, about teaching me about sun safety. I just took my hat off earlier because I needed to not have it blow away while we were driving here, but we're a bit more sheltered, so I've got it back on. And typically I'll have, say, factor 50. Usually around factor 50, possibly even with my moisturizing cream having a bit of sunblock protection in it as well, and reapplied fairly regularly and as often as possible. As you will have noticed, I'm actually quite fair-skinned. There's somewhere in there's Irish and Scottish genetics that haven't created a skin that was built for intensive sun exposure, so I do need to be particularly careful. I'm just going to stop here and see exactly what's happening with this leopard sighting. Let's pause for one moment while I have a chat with one of the guides. There seems to be some confusion on the radio as to who was going to come in first. Hello, hello. How are you?
Good, and you?
Good, thank you. How many vehicles are coming in?
You have to come in because you have to stand by again. Go in. Okay?
I can go in. You sure?
Yeah, you can go in.
Oh, sharp man. Thank you, thank you.
I'll take a step back.
Oh, no, shame. You can go and then I can come back. I'll head around and then come back.
Okay.
Yeah, Shop, you can stay and then just call me when you... Just give JB a shout. All right. Shop, man. Thank you. I think there was some confusion on the radio.
Okay.
Cheers, guys. Now, I'm just letting the guests go in and have a look. A lot of them only have maybe 2 or 3 days to spend out here, and there was some confusion as to who was going to be allowed into the sighting first. So I've just taken a step back because we still have plenty of time left on the sunset safari, and then he said he will give me a call on the radio when they're done there. Let's leave it at that. I'm just going to loop around to a more open area so that I can tell you a little bit about my snake experience, or my snake experiences for the day. It has been highly entertaining. Also, still on the lookout for any exciting birds to show you. Haven't quite been on the roll that Brent was this morning. I'm still keeping my eyes peeled. And although the airstrip seems to be an odd place to come and look, you'd be surprised what you can find around here in terms of bird life, especially some of the rarer ground birds. did just want to stop and tell you a little bit about the snake experience that we had today, and it's all connected to do with the spring experiences that we've had. Oh, I'm just listening to the radio to see what's happening there. Okay, they seem to have organized themselves for now. Now, this morning started out very early with a red-lipped herald in the shower at Inger's that we first saw, and then a variegated bush snake, I think it was, or a spotted bush snake, to just outside the bathroom at the DRC, where most of the rest of the crew live. Now, the other thing that happened to me this afternoon was I was having a nap. I was absolutely fast asleep this afternoon on my bed, and somebody came in to come and ask me something, and apparently this snake was on its way up into the bed. It was coming up over the pillow to come and join me in my afternoon nap. And as soon as the door was opened, it shot off under my suitcase. We spent a bit of time trying to get it out. It turned out to also be a bush snake, which I'm going to show you in a moment, because they are really beautiful snakes. Let me just see if I can find it. And it was quite an interesting way to wake up. Where is it gone? Here we go. Show you a picture of what it looks like. Really, truly beautiful snake. And this was the little creature that had decided that it just wanted to have an afternoon nap as well. And the reason that we've seeing so many snakes is it's just finally reached that temperature, as well as just after the rains, that they can really start to become mobile again. But you can see how absolutely gorgeous they are, with these beautiful black spots and the big eyes. And those big eyes tell us a lot about the way that the snake functions and the excellent eyesight that it has. Now, to somebody who isn't as well versed in the different snakes that we get in this area, they're often mistaken for something called a boomslang, which is one of the most venomous snakes in the world, or at least in South Africa. Hold on a second, I'm just being called, I think, to be into the leopard sighting. Standing by. Let's see if I can start joining the sighting. Yeah, standing by. Copy that, thank you very much. Okay, so we can make our way into the leopard sighting, but those bush snakes are completely harmless. They are really not dangerous in any way. They're not venomous. They do have a very slight venom, but it's not something that is of any danger to humans. But they do look very similar to boomslang, which have drop for drop the most potent venom of any of the snakes that we get out here, but that takes quite a long time to take effect, somewhere in the region of 48 hours. It's a hemotoxic venom, so it destroys the clotting ability of the victim's blood. In this case, this is just a harmless, beautiful snake who decided that a nice soft bed would be a good place to spend the afternoon. Thirsty day today. that my nap was interrupted by somebody coming into my room to ask something, because I think that rolling over and discovering a snake in one's bed unsuspecting can be quite a nasty shock. And there is a chance, although it is slim because they're not very aggressive snakes, it probably would have just slithered away in fright, but there is a chance if I had rolled over that it might have maybe given a bit of a bite in response. Just trying to find my best approach. Now, I will say, in case anybody is terribly worried about that encounter, that it is not that common for snakes to come into beds. I think I just got very unlucky. I was also very silly to be sleeping with the door open, so I won't be making that mistake again. I'll make sure that it's just the window that I have open. Going to try and get a nice position for you guys. How's that, Chandra? Is that a slightly back? Here we go. And it seems as though Shadow has spent some time this afternoon sleeping off her full meal, or full belly, and is back to eating the kill that she'd made this morning. I'm just trying to have a look as what it might be. There's not much left. Here we go. Hello, Shadow. Now, I'm not too sure where Madiba is. I think he's around the back of this kill. Looks to me like a steenbok. I'm seeing a flash of red color there at the feet. Good. Let's try and focus my binoculars. Now that to me looks like impala even. I think Shadow might have successfully taken an impala down. Just double check that. They were looking very, very full, and that fur does have a very red tinge to it, which makes me think it might be an impala. And it's amazing to think that even Shadow, who probably is around 40 kilograms, is more than capable of taking down a 50 kilogram impala. Although Shadow walked all the way back from here to Voyatella to collect young Madiba and bring him all the way back here to share in her kill, when she was with him this morning on Brent's sunrise safari, she was showing quite a bit of aggression and occasionally growling and pulling a face at Madiba whenever he got too close. Ah, that's definitely an impala. Where is she going to take it? She might just be shifting it around to try and get a better angle for the meat. And Clarissa from Toronto was wondering, because she has joined the drive late, what Shadow was up to in terms of pushing Madiba away. So as I mentioned, she was showing quite a lot of aggression towards him whenever he tried to get closer and snarling at him, although Brent said that he did also have a go at her tail, which might have provoked a lot of that snarling action from her. At the moment though, she's clearly the one who's got access to the kill. I'm not sure if Madiba hasn't had plenty of time to feed this afternoon. I'm sure he has. And when we do loop around, we'll get to have a look at how full he's looking. He's just on the other side of this fallen jackalberry that's at the back there. She's munching away on her impala. There are quite a lot of vehicles coming in and out of the sighting. A lot of people want to come and see this, but luckily I think we're coming to the end of that, and very soon I think we're going to have these two to ourselves. And that is really, really good news for Shadow and Madiba, that she's had this opportunity to feed on an impala. That's a really good meal for the two of them, and they've clearly devoured most of it actually, so no wonder this morning when we saw them they were so fat and panting. They looked absolutely stuffed when I saw them, and you can see how big and round Shadow's belly is. Now Madiba is, as I said, lying just behind us, or just behind the fallen tree that's behind Shadow. So when I do have an opportunity I will loop around to see him, but it's nice to see her feeding on this impala. Interesting to see her plucking the carcass now. I think she's trying to break into a different part to get to a separate part of the meat, rather than peeling back the skin, as lions often do. You can see there, she's not feeding at the moment, she's plucking the fur away. Yummy. And according to many of the viewers as well, there's been a lot of sawing that's been heard on the Arethusa Dam camera over the last few nights. And that will probably be one of the males. I'll check up with some of the guides and see if they've seen any males around that area. Now, I know that James actually had Quitile very, very close to where we are now. And I think that was only yesterday. So it could have been Quitile, it could well have been Shadow. I think that both Shadow and Madiba were both hanging out around Impala Plains for a couple of days before moving south. And I think we're probably only about 500 meters from where James had that visual of Quitile, which goes to show how fluid leopard territories can be. And apparently Quitile was also scent marking around this area, and she had suckle marks. So I'd love to know, it would be interesting to see the interaction between these two females, because if there are suckle marks, it means that Quitile has got cubs somewhere, is hiding cubs somewhere tucked away. It does just provide a useful lesson into the fluidity of the territorial boundaries of leopards and the overlap that will inevitably happen. We tend to think of leopard territories and lion territories like puzzle pieces with very set edges, but of course it doesn't work like that. Oh, lots of hair in her mouth. I love it when they do that and they try and clear it off their tongues. It's so funny. And once the other vehicle has settled in, it'd be nice to sit quietly and just hear the crunching noises that she's making. We'll just have to wait for the other vehicle to switch off. And there she is, using those beautifully adapted molars to shear into the flesh. Now, Kathy, and I'm sure many of the other viewers have picked up on the little injury that Shadow has underneath her left elbow on her front leg. And that was almost definitely, looking at it now, it's very fresh, and that's almost definitely from this kill. I would say I'm 90% certain that this happened while she was trying to kill this impala, especially because they are quite a large prey species. She's not the biggest leopard out here, and probably caused by, as we were talking about before, how sharp antelope hooves can be. It could well have been caused by a kick. I can't tell if this is a male or female impala, so I don't know if it has any horns. But that was probably caused by, I would say most likely, a kick, and 90% certain it was caused during this kill. But don't stress, because it's not deep at all, and animals are incredibly resilient and they heal very, very quickly. I don't think that's going to cause her any disadvantage at all. You can see in the way she's moving, it doesn't seem to be hurting her in any way. And a little bit earlier we saw her plucking away the fur. She's now fully, properly feeding on the carcass. But earlier she was just plucking hair away and licking it, and you all saw her pull that incredible disgusted face and pushing the hair out of her mouth. And Donna wants to know if leopards cough up hairballs in the same way that domestic cats do. And welcome to the Sunset Safari, Donna. It's great to have you. They do indeed. I have seen them do it on the odd occasion. Not that often. You can see how much they try to spit out. Oh, something's... No, back to feeding. Not sure if something caught her attention or she was just taking a moment to lift her head up and make sure all was okay around her. You can see how rapid her breathing is. That is one full leopard. She's panting away. Combination of the raised metabolism to help her digest the meal, as well as the fact that her stomach is so full that it is actually pushing up against her diaphragm, leaving her less space to breathe. It's not going to stop her though. She's going to keep scoffing away. He's going to reposition slightly because somebody else has just poked his little head up as well. I think we're going to get a clear view from here. Let's see if we can... She's tucked herself away a little bit into the thick block. But look whose head is coming out over the top of the tree. There's Madiba, and he's come to investigate. Hello, boy. I really, really enjoy this leopard. He's become such a character, and he's so full of fun and mischief. He's also panting heavily. He's obviously gorged himself as well. Now, I don't think he's feeling terribly hungry. He might even... Oh, no, he's going to try and come through and see what his mommy's up to. You can see already she's showing that irritation that we were talking about before. That was instantly in response to him. There you go, and again. And that is very, very interesting to see. How defensive Shadow is getting over her kills. And that is definitely, as far as I know, not something we've ever seen Shadow do. Except for this morning was the first time we'd seen it. And that is the first signs that she is starting to expect more independence from young Madiba. She's still happy to go and fetch him and bring him to a kill and look after him, but he is no longer to be tolerated feeding next to her. Now, I know that this view is not ideal, but at least we can get to see where both Shadow and Madiba are. Now, unfortunately, there's a vehicle in front of me and a vehicle behind me, so at the moment, we're going to stay where we are. Obviously, all of the guests really want to get to have an opportunity to view these beautiful animals, which we're just going to wait for now. But you can see Madiba's got half of the impala on the left, and Shadow has got half of them on the right. And that interaction was revealing in terms of what is happening with the mother-son dynamic. She's definitely feeling a bit grumpy towards him. Shame. Poor little boy. Must be very hard to understand when that happens. Now, you can in the time that we got to see both of them, you'll see that the entire kill is on the ground. And Angela was wondering why Shadow hadn't hoisted it into a tree around, or at least into a better tree. Originally she had it in a guari bush. Just want to see if I can get around. Yeah. I'm just waiting for one of the vehicles to pull out, and then we're going to loop around and reposition so we can get a slightly better view. Oh, no we're not. How are you? Good, thanks. Just want to see if maybe there's a good position we can get into where we can view both of them. I think we're going to struggle for now. Try and out a little bit. So I put a side on for now, and then we'll loop around. We are going to have a chance to reposition in a moment, but for now you can get an idea of the distance between mother and son. And I know in the past Shadow has something of a reputation, just to get back to Angela's question about hoisting the kill into a tree. She sort of tucked it into the guari bush, and I think there's, in her defense at the moment, there's not much in the way of options in the area that we're in without having to drag quite a heavy impala, which would be probably around her body weight, quite a distance to find a nice big tree. And putting it up into the fallen jackalberry that's behind them would be fairly futile, wouldn't keep it away from any of the scavengers out here. So I think in this particular case, they've had a chance to have a really good feed without being interrupted. But I think a heavy impala, a good 40 kilograms or 50 kilograms of impala, might have been too much to drag to a large tree. But Shadow does have something of a reputation of being very bad at hoisting her kills, and they very often get stolen by hyenas. And I'm not sure if that is because, or why that might be, or if it's something that we're going to see follow through in Madiba's behavior as he starts to become independent and make his own large kills. Now, I mentioned that it would be interesting to see what kind of technique young Madiba adopts over the next few months. And Jilly from Milwaukee was wondering, or wanted me to explain in a little bit more depth about the different leopard hunting techniques and whether or not, or how much of it, I suppose, in essence, is learned and how much of it is instinctive. So what is it that has made Shadow reluctant to hoist kills when her mother, as far as I know, her mother Karula certainly was never, and was very often recorded with hoisted kills? And will Madiba follow his mother's example? And it's a question that I can't answer with absolute certainty. I would say that there's components of both instinctive and learned behavior in this particular case, because Shadow clearly didn't learn this from her mother. Her mother didn't do it. But maybe because she became independent a little younger as a female cub, maybe she just something that she adopted. And maybe, there could even be a biological reason that we're not aware of. Maybe there's a tooth weakness that means she struggles to grip and pull a kill up a tree. I know that she has been seen with small kills like duikers and steenboks up trees before. Maybe she has a sore dew claw on her foot. We just don't know enough about the situation to know the reason behind it. But then in terms of what Madiba is going to do, I couldn't begin to predict. Personally, I think he will start hoisting his kills. I think the fact that he is as large as he is, he's already much bigger than his mother, he's showing much more strength in the front of his body. And I think it's entirely possible that he would start to hoist his own kills when he does eventually start to make the bigger kills. But it could also be that he just needs to learn by losing some of them first. I can hear the bones crunching of the impala as Shadow chews on them. And I share Tina's sentiments that it's absolutely incredible that we're getting to sit and watch these wild animals as we do, and how privileged that we are that we get to share in their lives. And for anybody who is joining us or is new to these safaris, this is live. So this is happening right now on Arathusa Game Reserve. We are sitting with two leopards, a mother and her just over a year-old cub, whose name is Madiba. And we've been following his story for months on end. And if you do have any questions that you'd like to send us, or any comments that you'd like to make, you can do so on #SafariLive on Twitter, or you can email through to questions@wildearth.tv. And the coolest part of it being live safari is that you just never know what's going to happen. And a lot of the time, neither do we. And it's so amazing to start to see this behavior from Shadow and her irritation and lack of tolerance towards her young male cub. Hello, big girl. Where are you off to now? Are you coming to lie down? I think she's coming to have a bit of a wee and to defecate. we saw that flash of irritation from Shadow when young Madiba went to go and share some of the kill. And Cheryl, you were a little bit concerned as to whether or not he got to eat a lot of the kill as well. And although Shadow has been showing some irritation, just have a look at that absolutely enormous belly that young Madiba is sporting, and you can be sure that absolutely enormous belly that young Madiba is sporting, and you can be sure that he has had plenty to eat. Now, Scott, James and myself were out this morning, and we were actually very close to finding these two. We did a lot of tandem tracking with one of the Chitwa trackers, and we tracked them all the way from Gowrie, Maine. And Susie Johnson was wondering, do we know for sure that Shadow brought down this impala? Now, judging by the tracks, I would say almost absolutely. The tracks went up and down. The first set was just Shadow's, and she came all the way from here, walked all the way to Gowrie, Maine, obviously called young Madiba, and he came bounding out, and they then walked back up the road together. So their freshest tracks were coming up from Impala Plains, or not from Impala Plains, sorry, from Gowrie, Maine. And you could see he was going backwards and forwards, but not consistently. He was just playing. So his tracks went backwards, forwards, up and down, side to side. You could see where he was pouncing out and jumping on his mom. Whereas her steps were very deliberately. She had gone to fetch him, and she'd come back with him, and she'd led him straight to where this impala kill is. So I would say, Susie, that I'm 90% sure that Shadow did take down this impala, and she is responsible for it. And there you can see how he's panting, how he looks thoroughly round at the moment. This is probably one of the roundest I've ever seen him. And maybe even Shadow was showing some irritation because he'd actually pushed his way into having the best parts of the kill, and she got tired of it. Now, we do have this sighting to ourselves, and we get to pick which leopard we go and see a little bit closer, and I'm actually going to pass that decision on to you guys, because Shadow is all the way off to my right. She's just laid down just behind the vehicle, and obviously Madiba is still there chomping on the impala. So who would you like to have a better view of? Would you like to stay with Madiba, or would you like to go and see what Shadow's up to? And I think for now, let's go backwards a little bit, just because we have got this lovely view of Shadow, and we actually don't get to see her all that often. And she was the one who was responsible for providing young Madiba with this meal, and she is nice and out in the open. And I also want to have a look at one of the observations from this morning. Apparently she does have some missing incisors, which is something I've never picked up on Shadow before. So I really want to just go and have a look. Oh no, let's just wait one moment. Let's see what he's up to. What you doing, mister? I think he was just shifting around for a different meal position. As he's munching away at the impala, Stephanie from California, welcome to the Sunset Safari. Now, you were wondering if Shadow's earlier irritation or lack of tolerance towards Madiba is a result or evidence of the fact that she might have conceived after mating with Tingana and the Anderson male. That thought did go through my mind. I'm just doing rough calculations, and I think it would probably be a bit early for that to be the case. Although definitely if she was pregnant, she might show a little bit of increased irritation around him. That being said, even if she was pregnant and she did give birth, she wouldn't necessarily push him out of the way or out of her life completely. I'm still wondering about what the chances are that Shadow's actually fallen pregnant, or what the chances are of conception, just because she did come into estrus so early. And to be honest, I don't think we know enough to really give you that information for certain, or at least I certainly wouldn't claim to. In terms of her irritation, I think it's part of a natural process. I think we're going to see it more and more. She's still going to come and collect him and take him to kills, but she isn't necessarily going to be as tolerant as she always was, and that is a natural part of the process. He's not young anymore, he's not small, he's bigger than her, and even in his boisterous play attempts, he could even be capable of hurting her slightly. So she does just have to, for her own sanity even, show a little bit more firmness with him and just make sure that he's starting to remember, just like you, maybe if you've raised any teenage boys yourselves, or teenage girls, whichever, you have to be just that little bit more firm with them, a little bit stricter as they start to push the boundaries. I'm going to shift back slightly and let's see if we can get a nice view of Shadow and her post-meal wash. Do it nice and slowly. Interestingly, she is almost more, not skittish, she definitely isn't a skittish leopard, but she's almost less comfortable with the vehicle than young Madiba is. I'm not going to push any further just because she did stop what she was doing, so I'm just going to let her relax again. Here we go, just having a bit of a wash after her meal. And I'm very happy for both of them. That is a nice, substantial meal. Now, this is a leopard that I happen to have a tremendous amount of respect for. This is the first time that she's ever managed to raise a cub past the age that Madiba is currently at. Sorry, let me try and rephrase that. This is the first time we've actually seen her raise her cub to the age that Madiba is at the moment. And she's lost somewhere in the region, or at least that we know of, she's lost 6 litters. And that is almost certainly due to the fact that she has had some rather rotten luck. And it's a very hard life out here, being a solitary female leopard trying to look after and raise cubs by yourself. Now, she's managed to do incredibly well with catching an impala like this. It's made for a very good meal, and they both will be going into the night with very full bellies. Now, in terms of how often she'll need to hunt and feed him and how often leopards eat, it depends on how much they have managed to get to eat. I don't think that these two will need food for probably somewhere in the region of another 3 or so days. The big cats have an amazing ability, both lions and leopards, to really gorge themselves on whatever they're eating. But they do have very, very fast working metabolisms. And they'll probably need a meal every 3 or so days, but they can be up to a week in between feeding times. I really also have a soft spot for her. Probably because her son is my personal favorite leopard. Not that you should have favorites, but you can't help it sometimes. Oh, Sindile is just coming through. Not Sindile, Madiba. He is dragging the kill along. Now I know that most of the viewers have said they're quite keen to stay with Shadow, just because we have spent quite a lot of time with Madiba in the past. But let's just see him trying to to tug the impala this way. What you up to, boy? And I think natural instinct's kicking in here about trying to move it into thick cover. Unless he is coming to irritate his mum. Just going to keep a close eye on her reactions as well. Sure. Well, that's exactly what he did. He tucked himself as deep as possible. Here we go. Let's see how Shadow reacts to him. Aww, all is forgiven. Bit of affection there between mother and son now that food is not involved. And that's nice to see. Very, very happy to see that. So that's what I mean by the fact that this is going to be a bit of a general process. So Madiba becoming independent and learning some independence will be a process of, or a gradual process. And it will start in situations that involve food, because for these animals that is where the most antagonism will come in as part of their survival. In all things, it's always either eating or mating that you will see the most aggression from these animals. So we'll see the most conflict between Madiba and his mother over food, but they're still going to be affectionate, and we must still remember that she did come and fetch him. He really is an extraordinarily good looking leopard, this one. He's catching the various bugs and flies that are moving around his head, or trying to anyway. He's snapping at them. Just going to shift backwards so that we can keep an eye on both of them, what both of them are up to. Let's just shift around and see what they're both up to. A really special sighting actually this evening. We get to see both the start or the beginnings of Madiba's independence, as well as the fact that there is still that mother-son bond. Just making making a nice wide loop so that I don't cause any disturbance. Spend a little bit of time with Shadow. Madiba has moved off again, back to where the other half of the impala kill was. It's nice just to spend a little bit of time with her. Still trying to see those incisors that were mentioned, but just have a look at how incredibly rapidly she is panting. As we zoom in on her mouth, you can see her neck moving there. Oh, excuse me. I apparently shouldn't try and breathe and talk at the same time. Now, I've mentioned that this is the first cub that Shadow has raised to this age, or that has survived, and that she has lost 6 cubs, or 6 sets of cubs previously. And John Sherman was wondering how many cubs she can have at one time. Now, John, typically the average for female leopards is around 2, but they can have 3 as well. I'm just trying to think, I read somewhere about a very unusual case of 6 being born, but that is the absolute exception and highly, highly unusual. That was the world record. But that generally the number sits at an average of 2, occasionally 3, and sometimes even 1. Hello, beautiful girl. Well done. Now, if she is pregnant from that mating, having a quick wash. The nice thing about leopards is that they are quite fastidious in terms of cleanliness. And that's important if you're a solitary animal, because you have to keep your scent hidden. Hey, you're off to, big girl. She's making her way back to where she left the impala, or part of the impala. Now let's reposition. The little one is just tucked here under the bush, so I don't want to scare him away. Not so little one, actually. Bigger than his mom now. Stop and have a look at him. What he's up to. Now, an impala kill, compared to, say, a steenbok or a duiker kill, which is probably about half the size, is a really, really good meal for these two. And Ramon, you were wondering how long it will keep them fed. Now, they've munched quite a lot of it. There's still, I would say, maybe 20% of the meat left, maybe a little bit less. However, they do have limited time left with this kill. So because Shadow hasn't hoisted it into a tree, and unless she does so fairly quickly, I'm already starting to catch whiffs of it. Especially because it has been such a hot day and decomposition is sped up in the way that it is. And if I can smell it from here, that means a hyena a kilometer away can smell it fairly easily. So I would say that it is almost certain, unless they get very, very lucky, that unless Shadow hoists this soon, they will lose this kill tonight. And they'll probably eat until they are completely stuffed and then move off, maybe even go off in search of a drink, although leopards are not as water dependent as a lot of the other animals out here. But I would not say that if we were to come back here tomorrow morning we would find anything. My prediction would be that it will be gone. Especially because I'm not sure if you were watching the sunset safari that we did the other day, but we stopped at a hyena latrine on Arethusa, and that's probably about 500 meters from where we are now. So they are moving through this area regularly. My goodness, that was a very, very full leopard cub. Okay, let me reposition. A nice view of them once again. It's so nice to see them so well fed. I'm not sure when they last ate, but this has definitely come at a good time for them. And I will say that whatever Shadow's perceived faults, I have never seen young Madiba looking particularly hungry. That might be because he's starting to hunt for himself. Okay, let's just see where she decides to go before I pick an exact position. Shadow is stopped here. Giving me the runaround today. Tucked away behind the bushes. And sorry to interrupt your ablutions, Mr. Madiba, but he's just having a quick urination. You can see not spraying backwards as an adult male leopard would do. He's still squatting down to urinate. Still a baby. Not showing any signs of dominance, which of course is going to take him probably somewhere in the region of 4 to 5 years before he even thinks along those lines. He's going to lie down and sleep off some of that fat belly of his. I cannot remember ever seeing him quite so full. Now, if there are people joining us for the first time, as there so often are, this is a live safari, so what you're seeing is happening right here on Arethusa Game Reserve in the Sabi Sands, and we are looking at a male leopard cub who is just over a year old. He is with his mother on an impala kill. His mother's name is Shadow. She's a 9-year-old female and already much smaller than he is. And it is always great to hear that there are new viewers, and there have been a couple of remarks at how relaxed these leopards are around vehicles, and questions as to whether or not the spotlight bothers them. And the answer to that is the Sabi Sands has a fantastic history of very careful guiding practices, which has allowed these leopards to become as relaxed as they are. And it's a state of exposure that has been taught as well, passed along through the generations. So mothers teach their cubs to be relaxed. And it is so important in terms of their survival that they are relaxed enough that tourists can want to come and see and view them and get to share in this time with them. And then, of course, invest in the money that is so necessary to protect them in these conservation areas. Now, in terms of the spotlight, I'm making sure that I don't shine the bright beam directly in his eyes. It is filtered. And you can see he's happy enough to look up. Now, I would not be doing this with any of the diurnal or the daytime animals, but for the nocturnal animals, they have very well adapted membranes at the back of their eyes called the tapetum lucidum, which bounces back any excess light. It gives them fantastic night vision, but it also means that they are not seriously affected by the spotlight, although I wouldn't be shining it directly straight into his eyes. You can see he's not blinking, he's not squinting. He's quite happily looking off in the direction of the light. So, Monique, it is great to have you as a new viewer. Welcome to the Sunset Safari. And I do hope you'll be joining us for the future safaris that we have twice a day, every day. And the wonderful thing about these live safaris is that we do get to follow the stories of the various characters. So as I'm sure many of the regular viewers will tell you, we've been with young Madiba, or following young Madiba, for months now, and following his growth from a rather ungainly leopard cub to a rather ungainly, slightly bigger leopard cub, who is now much more playful and much more independent. And if you are a new viewer and you are joining us for the first time, please let us know. It's fantastic to hear from you. And then we can also give you a little bit of background into what it is that you're watching. Where are you off to, young man? Still hear Shadow crunching away behind me, so she's still around. I don't know where he's off investigating. Now, earlier on we got to see Shadow snacking away on that impala, and she was plucking at the fur just to remove some of it so she could bite into a fresh part of the kill. And John, you were wondering if leopards have furry tongues like domestic cats. And they do indeed, so do lions. But when we talk about furry with these big cats, it's not so much furry as almost spiny. It's incredibly rough. And if they were to lick you a couple of times, you would actually start to feel it. You'd probably get grazed skin. It's much tougher and much more solid than the spines on a domestic cat's tongue. Very rough. It's there not just for pulling the hair away from the skin of a carcass, which they very often do. You'll see them start to lick around. You'll see both lions and leopards do it, lick around where they want to break into the kill to start feeding. But they also use it to get meat away from bone. Once they've chewed away some of the larger pieces, they can use it to pare the meat away from bone. So very, very effective at the way that they eat. Now, young Madiba has settled down again. He's lying down. And I just want to see for the last, if we can spend a bit more time before the end of the sunset safari with Shadow. I've just heard her cough, so I know that she's still there. Let's see if we can reposition to see her for a bit. Oh, hold on. The little one's up and about again. I just want to keep an eye on him for now, just to make sure he doesn't disappear. Shift around so that we can keep up with him and see where he's going on his nocturnal adventures. Somehow, I think with a belly like that, he's not going to be going too far. Okay, he is lying down again. I just want to see what Shadow is up to. Got her feeding away again on the impala. That was the crunching that we could hear. Let's see if we can just listen for a moment, and although she's pulling at the skin, but we can hear the sounds of her feeding. Now, we have been experimenting with different radio techniques, so I think that this next question comes from Red, but forgive me if I'm getting that wrong, it's not too clear. But you wanted to know if it took me some time to desensitize to seeing kills like this, and how do I feel now when I sit with them or when I see them. I've always had quite a pragmatic approach. Nobody ever wants to see an animal in pain, and I certainly was known to my parents when I was younger as being very, very soft about it. I hated seeing any kind of animal suffering, but I'm also aware of the fact that if we want to get to see these incredibly beautiful animals like this, that it's part of life that we just need to accept and move on from. Now, I've seen a couple of kills, and I would never describe it as fun per se, but it is a fascination that is there at the way that these animals operate. And though it can be very distressing, at the moment I feel quite comfortable with the knowledge that it is all an entirely natural process. And it's always wonderful when the babies start to come through, the baby impalas, and you start to see new life coming through. As well as the fact that if I really sit and think about it now, she could well be currently feeding up her body to bring new cubs into the world. And that's a really, really important part of this whole process. But that's not to say that I don't feel bad for the animals suffering. I would say that I feel far, far worse if I see an animal that's being killed in some way due to either human error or human fault. That is a situation that I definitely have not in any way become desensitized to. But when we look at this beautiful predator that nature has created, it's all part and parcel of the same process. And she is so perfectly adapted for this life that she lives. And I'm actually really enjoying getting to spend a little bit more time with Shadow. I've spent quite a lot of time with her son, and he's highly, highly entertaining. But it's nice to see and get to have a look properly at her. I'm just thinking what it must have been like for her early this morning or late last night, after she'd put all of that energy into killing an impala. Maybe she stopped to snack on it for a bit first, and then she had to walk maybe 3 or 4 kilometers to go in search of her son, and then lead him all the way back here after having put all of that energy into killing something that is probably close to equal in her body weight. And then him jumping on top of her the whole time and being playful. I would say it's no wonder that she's starting to feel a little bit grumpy with him. Now, I mentioned that I think she's probably going to lose this kill sometime tonight because she hasn't hoisted it into a tree. But if there was a nice, appropriate tree for her to have hoisted it into, or to have carried it up into, she would essentially be dragging her own body weight, holding it in her teeth, and using her claws to pull herself and the kill up a tree, which is something that we sort of started taking for granted. We know that leopards pull their kills up trees, but how absolutely phenomenal is that in terms of strength? Now, Tina, you were wondering if leopards have a higher muscle mass than other cats, because they do that. Now, I'm not too sure in terms of muscle mass, but I do think that they must have very special muscle adaptations. And I've had a chance to touch a darted or anesthetized leopard in the past that was being translocated to a different area. And whilst I expected their muscles to be hard as iron, because that's what we think of when we think of people who do lots of exercise, they've got very, very strong, solid muscles. But in fact, the muscles were completely soft and floppy. And I think that's just because they have a completely different muscular cellular structure to the ones that we do. In terms of muscle mass, I'd say pound for pound, they are incredibly strong. Just bear with me one moment, guys. Somebody's trying to get me on the Game Drive channel. Standing by. Copy that. I think I will pull out. I'll be pulling out of the sighting now. No, negative. Definitely not. Now guys, we do have a very interesting update on the radio. What's the position of those Ngala? Whereabouts are those Ngala coming from? Now, as much as I would very much like to end the show here, I've just been called by one of the guides to say that there are lions on their way up, almost directly in this direction. Now, because we're sitting with our spotlight and we're talking next to the leopards and we've got the smell of a vehicle, there's a chance that we could actually jeopardize their safety because we're drawing attention away from their alertness to the area around them. So what I am going to do before the other vehicles get too close is I'm actually going to pull out of the sighting straight away. We're not going to, obviously we do not want to in any way endanger them. Good luck, girl. Be safe. Now I've been trying to get hold of the guides to ask which lions and where they are coming from, just so that I can choose my way out more carefully. Good luck, little boy. Pulling out of the sighting immediately because I can actually see the vehicles, the lights of the vehicles that are approaching with those lions. This pathway away from the leopards. They are approaching from the south, so close to Shirley's. Unfortunately, it is a 3-vehicle sighting, so I can't go and have a look at them. But it sounds as though it was the Birmingham boys on their way through. I know that they were on Mala Mala. To head back onto the road. Now, in a situation like that, it's really, really important that we show a level of respect to those leopards and make sure that we don't do anything, obviously, to jeopardize their safety. And you can see how the guides were concerned as well, because they were getting my attention on the radio. So for now, this is how we are going to end our sunset safari. Fear not, the leopards will be fine tonight now that they're not distracted. And a big thank you to Jean-Andre for all of his hard work, and to Nikki and to Lou in FC. And we will see you all tomorrow morning for the sunset safari. Thank you for joining us and have a wonderful day.